I was diagnosed with late stage cancer. So it was metastatic melanoma. It had moved into multiple organ systems, and they're giving me 2 months, maybe 2 years to live. I was devastated. I really leaned back on my chiropractic values and really believing that health is the normal and disease is the abnormal. And I didn't feel cancer was making me sick. I really felt metabolically sick, and that's why my body was expressing cancer. All metabolic disease, things like cancer, heart disease, diabetes, all of these are really downstream of poor and broken metabolic function. Yeah, so I'm not dead. We weren't always the happy, healthy guys, Brian. We were the overweight, sick, cancer-riddled, almost dead guys.
Depressed guys as
well.
Yeah, you probably wouldn't have brought us on the podcast to learn how to actually achieve that.
This week, I interviewed speakers, podcast hosts, and health influencers Rob and Randy from the Happy Healthy Life. We discussed all things metabolism, mindset, and nutrition. We also dove into both Randy and Rob's health struggles, along with morning routines, the importance of grounding, revving up your metabolism with SCT oil, and their tips to get your body back to what it once was. Really enjoyed my interview with Rob and Randy. I know you will too. Thanks so much for listening and enjoy the show. All right, welcome to the Get Lean, Eat Clean podcast. My name is Brian Gryn, and I have Dr. Rob and Dr. Randy on. Welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having us, Brian.
Yeah, excited to be here, boss.
Yeah, excited to have you on. The Happy Healthy guys, maybe is more suited, brand suited, right?
Well, we're not in our normal podcast studio where we've got the Happy Healthy Guys logo in the back. So we're in a makeshift studio today, but it's going to be fine because the message is going to be great today. I'm excited to have this conversation.
Yeah, you guys are looking good. If you're watching on YouTube, they're dressed like they're in Miami, which they are, right?
We are.
Yep, when in Miami, right?
Yeah, exactly. And well, for people who don't know the Happy Healthy Guys, maybe just a brief background of how you guys got into this space and what led you there.
Yeah, it's one of those things where we could have ever predicted that we'd be doing what it is that we're doing right now. We're both retired chiropractors. And so that's where things started. Always been in the holistic space, really having a passion for helping people and teach people. And with our chiropractic roots, everything always went back to first finding the cause of the problem and then going from there. And so while in practice, helping people, we were teaching people nutrition from the standpoint of like a lot of people teach, and it's okay, calories in, calories out. You need to exercise more in order to be able to lose weight. Meanwhile, through that time period, being a chiropractor, I really struggled with my weight. I had struggled with my weight my entire life. When I was 13 years old, I was 210 pounds and about 5'4", about as wide as I was tall. And I started doing what my mom had taught me to do. And that was, well, if you want to lose weight, son, you need to stop eating as much as you're eating. And so literally started starving myself. And so, you know what? I was ashamed always of the way I looked. I was bullied. And that right there led me to becoming anorexic. And so that wasn't the healthiest option for me, just not eating anymore. And so from that point on, I started going, okay, that's not very healthy. I literally almost died. And just started doing this a different way. And so that's where I started getting into fitness, into eating better, and then ultimately going to chiropractic school, helping people. And I was still, though, struggling with my weight. I was that person who had to be perfect with what I was eating. I had to be perfect with my exercise in order to maintain a healthy weight. It was really super, super frustrating. And then I had an injury to my back, which is really ironic, being a chiropractor, that literally took me out to where I couldn't adjust for literally days. And it was miserable to have to get up in the morning to go to work to adjust people because I could hardly walk. And meanwhile, at that time, what happened is I started gaining all this weight. And so that right there, and we'll talk about why that ended up happening. And so my only strategy was, well, to exercise more. I couldn't do that because, well, I couldn't walk. And then the other thing was, okay, I need to try to eat better. And well, not being able to walk, not being able to go to practice, not being able to provide for my family, was really depressed. And next thing you know, I'm about 80 pounds heavier and overweight. And so while that was happening, what I didn't realize is that Randy over here was going through his own crisis. So I was going through this health challenge, health crisis, and so is he.
Yeah, so Rob is by the way, he's my best friend for over 23 years. He was actually probably one of my first mentors in chiropractic. I would go to his office when I was in
Yeah.
school there in Dallas, Fort Worth, and I would just want to learn everything from this guy. So, been around this guy for a long time, and I learned a lot about, really chiropractic and the principle that I fell in love with. It took me over where I was like, man, I really never wanted to be any type of a doctor, but I didn't understand there were other types of doctors. So when I found out, wait a second, there's actually doctors who look at the body as not broken, but as actually that health would be the normal, that appealed to me. So I fell in love with chiropractic. I was in practice for 8 years, running an incredibly successful practice, helping a lot of people. And here's where my world fell apart metabolically. I was diagnosed with late stage cancer. So it was metastatic melanoma. And Brian, it had moved into multiple organ systems, and they're giving me 2 months, maybe 2 years to live.
No.
I was devastated and felt really ashamed, felt like a fraud because I'm telling everybody else how to get healthy. And here I am, my worst nightmare. So you really find out what you believe when you're thrown in the fire. It's interesting, right? We say a lot of
Wow.
things, but what are you really going to do when it literally is staring you in the face? So I really leaned back on my chiropractic values and really believing that health is the normal and disease is the abnormal. And I didn't feel cancer was making me sick. I really felt metabolically sick, and that's why my body was expressing cancer. So that really started me on a road of wanting to figure out what is the cause of what is going on here. I really wanted to look at cancer really as a metabolic condition. And I don't know, that may be a huge jump for maybe some of your listeners or for maybe people who don't understand that. But really, all metabolic disease, I mean, things like cancer, heart disease, diabetes, all of these are really downstream of poor and broken metabolic function. So I ended up going over into Spain, of all places. I'd met a doctor, a cellular biologist. He's a medical doctor from Lebanon, Dr. Raymond Helou. And I remember getting about a 20-second consultation for about $30,000.
That's a long way to go for that.
It's a long way to go. And
Yeah.
I'd never been out of the country at that time. This was 15 years ago. I was 35 years old.
Mm.
So I go all the way over there and I'm waiting to meet with this doctor. And I'm second guessing everything. Am I going to die? Because I'd really just declined any type of standard medical care. No chemo, no radiation, no surgery. Just had really moved out of that model. I wasn't sure what I was going to do, but sometimes you don't have to know what you're going to do. You just have to know what you're not going to do. And then you put your values to the test. So I'm waiting to hear from this doctor. And he basically busts through the door and he points at me and he goes, "I'll do nothing that will kill you." And I'm like, well, that's great, because they couldn't offer me that in America. He goes, "Now you might die, but I'll do everything I can to get your body adapting again, chemically, physically, and emotionally. I think it's your best chance to get well." And here's the best part, Brian. He goes, "No need for theatrics. Are you ready to get started?" And if you can imagine what I said, I was like, heck yeah, let's go. Because I really believed I'd found the guy who wanted to treat the person metabolically versus focusing on a symptom or a diagnosis, where a lot of times you really never get to the cause of the problem. Long story very short, I got well in about 90 days naturally. And my mind's getting blown because I'm like, well, I guess it wasn't about just not dying. There's some real metabolic dots that are connecting. And if I could overcome a late stage cancer diagnosis in a matter of just months, what is it really that the body isn't capable of? And we know that the body really is a healer, that the greatest doctor isn't in Spain or, in this major, famous hospital or with a bunch of letters behind their name. Really, the greatest doctor is on the inside. And when you create an environment, Brian, where your body can heal, it will do exactly that. So my certainty, level of confidence in what I went through, I wanted to come back and help people in a new way. And so guess who the first person I wanted to help?
The doctor? Oh, okay.
My best friend, right?
Right, right.
At this time, he's severely overweight, bad back, his world's falling apart. I'm overcoming this horrible condition, getting well, wheels are spinning. And so this is where we were able to put together and start looking at, okay, how can we create a protocol to help you? Because if I could overcome, once again, if I could overcome this metabolic condition, Man, this weight loss thing and this metabolic flexibility, it ought to be really easy to do. So that's kind of where we got involved, working together more. Like, how do we now maybe move out of practice? We still love what we do, but I think we're missing the boat here. Maybe God's doing something bigger here, and maybe there's something we can do that's going to help more people. So, you start with yourself first, and that was this guy.
So literally we jumped right in studying the science of metabolism and then applying those things. And for me, I was like, okay, I have a couple of options. I could do surgery, which is completely outside of what our belief system is, especially being a chiropractor, or I could start doing these and applying these principles to my own life. And then as a result of doing that, well, I lost the 80 pounds and I've kept that off now for 14 years. And now I don't struggle with my weight like I did before, like a lot of people do, with having to be perfect with what it is that you're eating with your diet, or having to exercise or be in the gym for hours and hours a day. So here's the most important thing that I learned out of this entire thing was that, you know what? I didn't have a weight problem. I didn't have a genetics problem because I thought I was supposed to struggle with my weight because I watched my mother struggle with her weight. I didn't have an exercise problem where I wasn't exercising
You were
enough.
exercising like crazy.
Yeah, and as I was getting older, like a lot of people think, as you get older, well, it's just going to get harder. Well, that's common, but that's not normal. And so I didn't have any of those things as my problem. What I had was a metabolism problem.
Yeah.
Nobody had ever explained to us how you could actually heal or fix a metabolism problem. And so that's what it is that we learned. So not only did I lose that weight and keep that weight off, a lot of really great things happened. The inflammation in my lower back went away. I had high blood pressure during that time period when I was struggling. My blood pressure went back down to normal, started feeling better than I'd ever felt, more energy. So all those things that I had just attributed to life, and those are just things that happen in life, you know what? Now I'm actually truly experiencing living life the way our bodies were designed. So one of the core foundational things that we have to make sure for us that we always teach the people that we work with is that, you know what? It's like he said, is your body was created and designed to heal. You deserve to have health because that right there is how our bodies are created. The body doesn't need any help healing. It just needs no interference.
Right there.
So when you can remove that interference, whether that's toxic foods, whether it's toxic thoughts, whether it's removing any interferences inside the body that are happening physically, once you remove those things, you really can create an environment where better things are way more likely to happen. And for me, it was a healthier metabolism.
Yeah, so I'm not dead. He's not overweight. Great clinical outcomes. We weren't always the happy, healthy guys, Brian. We were the overweight, sick, cancer-riddled, almost dead guys.
Depressed guys as well. So you probably wouldn't have brought us on the podcast to learn how to actually achieve that.
Funny now. It wasn't funny at the time. But
Yeah, no kidding. And what was like the biggest thing you learned, Randy, from like the 90 days that you worked with? What was his name, the doctor you worked with?
Yeah, Dr. Raymond Hilu, Hilu.
Okay. Are you still in touch with him, or was that like, or?
Yeah, I am actually. We've sent him probably, I don't know, hundreds and hundreds of people over there. We were there actually this time last year. We were over there in Spain. We had actually a family member I had taken over there that was struggling, and a couple of our clients and people that had even heard our podcast had gone over there. So we were over there and got to hang out with Dr. Hilu and really see he's still doing what he's been doing now for 15 years. It's pretty remarkable.
And the people you brought over there, they had more than just like weight issues. These are people who were.
Oh, no, these were cancer.
Cancer.
Riddled,
okay.
People riddled with cancer who some had gone through the medical model and kind of left them for dead. Some were like, no, I want to right out of the gate. I just don't want to engage in any type of allopathic treatments. They really wanted to get to the cause and give their body the best chance. Hilu's really been doing biohacking before biohacking was really even cool. So it's interesting.
Yeah. And like, I guess, obviously that's very against the traditional model that you see in the States. When you hear of a cancer diagnosis, what was like the main principles that he did to help get you back?
Yeah, I think number one is, and we've talked about it, but I think it's still so core, is he didn't want to treat a condition. So my journey into Spain wasn't to find a doctor, not even a natural doctor, to treat my cancer. I really wanted to figure out, what am I doing? What are the things that are causing my body to be in this state, right? The cause really is the cure. And, if you receive a diagnosis and now the journey is about treating a condition, you really almost outsource all of your healing efforts over to people that really maybe potentially don't even know what health is. I think it can be very dangerous. Not that people haven't been helped by the traditional medical system, but let's
Sure.
just be honest, Brian. It's an unmitigated failure the way we operate and how we do healthcare in America and really across the country when you're diagnosing and treating conditions. So that was foundational, is not treating a disease, but really somebody working on treating me, working with me, detoxing me. Plus, I had to get out of my life, to be honest with you. I was in a pretty much a pressure cooker of a clinic. My feet were taped to the bicycle. That's not probably healthy to work 80 hours a week. And, in the way, chiropractic, you really do give and give. You're taking
Mm.
on a lot of energy with people every single day. So I think number one was, knowing that, hey, the journey is, let's get to the cause. Let's create an environment where my body can heal. But looking back on it now, I can see a lot of mistakes metabolically that I believe I was making. One of those was, I was that guy who, I kind of came up reading all the muscle fitness magazines and was a little insecure. I wasn't the biggest guy, and so I just wanted to build a lot of muscle. And
Hmm.
so I started adopting very early, really in high school and even into my college years, that eating 6, 7 times a day, eating 30, 40 grams of protein every meal to, make sure I'm getting all these insulin hits to grow my body. And I would carry around 185, even up to 195 pounds on a 6 foot frame. I was forcing my body to be big. Well, clearly, that's not an ideal anti-aging strategy. And it's definitely not a strategy if you're wanting to prevent chronic disease, because obviously all those insulin hits really were putting me into growth mode. I really didn't get a lot of repair time for my body to actually heal, not really much autophagy going on, kind of staying in that mTOR pathway where I'm always in growth mode. So that was one of the mistakes I believe was very significant in why I was forcing myself to be big and creating an environment where cancer could grow. And then here's another one too. I look back now, it was really, I'm looking at linoleic acid intake, omega-6, polyunsaturated fatty acids, linoleic acid. I ate a lot of seed oil, took a lot of fish oil, lots of seeds, lots of oils, lots of flax oil. And I'm looking back now, man, clearly there's a huge issue now that we know omega-6 is a metabolic poison, and our body does store it, and it does create an environment where your body, your mitochondria begin to shut down. You're creating and producing less energy. Well, really, all disease has a mitochondrial metabolic component to it. So a lot of seed oil, thought I was doing great. Lots of overtraining too, twice a day in the gym, multiple meals, lots of processed, even protein bars and protein shakes. Not that some of that can't be great, but if you think about it, if I'm forcing myself to be big, I'm eating all the time, I'm crushing seed oils, and I'm eating a lot of processed, quote, healthy food. I don't know that it was the best environment for me, because now I carry around 170 pounds and I'm way more metabolically healthy, and I'm able really to have the flexibility to not have to worry about counting macros anymore or being, militant with my diet. I just focus on eating real food until I'm full. And when I'm hungry again, I eat real food again and I
Hmm.
train way less. And I'm at 50, I put my body up against my 25-year-old body, definitely my 35-year-old body. So kind of flies in the face of getting older or having to, do a lot of things we've been told. When you're metabolically strong and healthy, there really isn't anything that your body's not capable of. So pretty exciting to know that I'm not in that calorie prison anymore, and really started to wake up to a lot of the lies that we believed about nutrition.
Yeah, it's amazing when you just, you keep it simple though, but you talk about like eating real foods and you hear that a lot, but it can be really that simple. I think nowadays there's a lot of different camps as far as eating, up from, the carnivore all the way to, vegan, vegetarian, and somewhere in between.
Yeah.
Like, I think that people that come from a standard American diet, and whatever they go to, as long as it's, real food, I think that's like a step in the right direction. Obviously there's extremes, but yeah, I mean, it can be as simple as that, right?
It
I mean,
absolutely can be as simple as that.
Yeah.
And you're talking to the right folks here. At least for myself, I'm super simple. And when I look at even the practicality of things, like for example, when I grew up listening to my body, my mom would always say, "Hey, you have to eat breakfast. You know what? Eat everything on your plate." I hated eating breakfast for my body. I knew I didn't feel good when I did that, but I just did it because that's what everybody said that you were supposed to do. So even when you start looking at when we were in Spain, for example, and people there in the Mediterranean, they don't get up immediately and start eating food. They don't eat food until a little bit later in the day. And when they are eating these foods, you are looking at them eating single ingredient item foods. And so one of the things that we like to always say to keep things simple is to sci-fi. So focus on eating single ingredient food items. So when you're there in Spain and they're eating, manchego cheese, for example, well, what's in that?
One ingredient.
Cheese. One ingredient,
cheese,
right?
yeah.
Olive oil, just olive oil. And so I think in the United States, because of how it is that we've been trained to eat, first thing in the morning, and then what are we trained to actually eat? Well, ultra processed food, ultra processed sugary food, first thing in the body. So like he was saying, it's already creating this environment inside the body for the cells that are toxic. And then if the cells are toxic, there's no way that mitochondria is going to be efficiently utilizing the energy that it needs to and creating energy, right, for our metabolism to have a healthy metabolism. So when it comes to just simplicity, the thing that we always talk about is in order to be able to make sure that you are getting nutrient dense food is surf for your food. And so surfing, not like surfing on a surfboard, like the ocean right outside this window here, but it's SERF, simply eat real food, right?
No.
What is real food, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Set it on the counter, come back 2 weeks later. Well, it's gone bad, right? Set it on the counter like a Twinkie or even protein bars these days, right? You can set a protein bar on a counter, come back 3 years from now, and it looks exactly the same. So I remember when, it was all about, and we're practicing chiropractic and we wouldn't eat during the day because we'd have these busy shifts and we'd have these different protein bars. I would stick them on my backpack. I remember opening up my backpack and cleaning it out like 3 or 4 years later, protein bar stuck in the bottom of my backpack that I didn't even know was there. Open it up and it looked exactly the same as it would have 3 years prior. And that's a quote, healthy food, right? Not so healthy because it's got 100 different ingredients in it for the body.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a good and bad, right? Like the convenience of a protein bar over maybe something else could play a good role. I mean, but nowadays there's a lot more options when it comes to choosing like protein bars. Probably 10, 15, 20 years ago, there weren't as many options. And now some of these companies have gotten their stuff together. Like I'll look at these ingredients and there's, 4 or 5, maybe 6 ingredients, and they're all like real foods. So I do think, there's an advantage, but I agree. I mean, like for traveling, maybe it is an advantage to use them from time to time because, you don't want to eat airport food. But if you're at home,
definitely not airport food,
right?
which looks very similar to hospital food. I don't know that there's much of a difference.
Yeah, and some airports are better. There's some better options than others. I will say that. But yeah, I mean, anytime you could cook for yourself, I think that's like one of the biggest health hacks people could do is just knowing what you're putting in your food. That's something my wife and I do a lot. We always like put something out the night before. I think being prepared is where you can really gain that edge because I see people that aren't eating healthy, and those are the people that aren't planning ahead and just preparing themselves for, having like these healthy meals.
Yeah, you even like speaking of airports, it's crazy how you'll catch an early flight and people are lined up everywhere into all the fast food places in the airport.
Right.
It's like a 2-hour flight. You can't, make it for 2 hours before you land at 10:30 at your final destination.
Yeah.
People are kind of on autopilot a little bit where, you're thinking you have to get breakfast in. I'm in an airport. And we look at that, it really kind of models a lot of how society lives on that autopilot. You're not really thinking about it. But I'll tell you what, I think about it, but I think about it in a way where it's been very freeing for me, Brian, where I don't worry so much about being so militant or worrying about counting all my macros or having to get so many grams of protein. I really feel like when you think about eating, bioavailable, nutrient dense food, these are more ancestrally consistent foods. When you think about eating those foods, they do create a lot of satiety in the body. And so
Sure.
when you eat fake food or processed food, that's how people are overeating. And of course, we already know with all the food additives and the ingredients creating more people hungry. Heck, seed oil actually acts on, your body and hits the part of the duodenum where you actually increase hunger because it's like smoking weed, so to say, like the cannabinoid system. You're hitting that in your body and making yourself more hungry. So flavoring agents and processed ingredients and these oils. So when you eat real food and you sci-fi single ingredient food items, it makes it easier to go, okay, that makes sense. That's ancestrally consistent, and not overthinking it, because you start overthinking it, it does get confusing and it does get hard. And that's where you get confused. You usually don't do anything.
Yeah. And I mean, you talk about like doing some forms of fasting. I've gone through doing more fasting and cutting back, and you're sort of seeing that a little bit in the health space, because I think obviously I do think fasting is a tool, but it could also be overused.
Oh yeah.
Oh, I abused it for sure. When I came back from Spain, I started going into some deep fasting states, and it just kind of carried on because, I was eating the 6, 7 times a day. I get this diagnosis. We're over there in Spain. We're looking at people not eating all the time. And so I definitely abused it, which obviously can have huge issues. Most people, they're not able to even fast anyway because they're not even metabolically healthy enough to fast. So yeah, I agree. I do love eating breakfast. I like to eat within
Yeah,
an hour of waking. I want to take advantage of that window where
sure.
my body's prepped and ready versus I went years, eating maybe 1 or 2 times a day. So I definitely abused it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah, myself included. Like I went a while there where I was probably not eating enough and over
Yeah.
fasting. But the experience of doing it, I think, is good just to understand, like, because a lot of people say they're hungry, but you're really not hungry, right? Like understanding like true hunger and like sort of your body signals. So I do think it's if you've never tried it, like to give it a try, obviously speak with someone to help you, like a health professional, obviously, or someone that knows what they're doing if you need guidance. But now that I come back, like, yeah, like I never was. Now I actually try to actually eat earlier in the day more. So maybe I feel like in Europe and stuff and overseas in Spain, and like they probably have their meals. Well, some communities have their meals late. I know that. Like
Yeah.
probably just depends on the on where you're at. But
They're definitely not making food choices based on how quickly you can get it, eat it, and go to the next thing in life.
yeah,
They're sitting down. There's usually family and friends and conversation and community, more blue zone-ish, where the community is really a part of your culture and what you do. You appreciate the food. You're grateful for the food. You chew your food. You
right.
breathe. You sit outside. Like there's a lot of nuance to that conversation. But
Mm.
yeah, they're definitely not picking food based off how quickly they can get it, eat it in the car, and go to the next thing they're headed to.
Right. So it's like more of eating is more of like it's like a 2 hour, could be 2 hours, right? Hour,
Yeah.
2 hour. Like in the States, it's like how quick, probably, we'll cook our own meals. My wife, she likes to cook, and it
Yeah.
might take an hour. And then we're done in like 15 minutes. It's like, you know,
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, or you're driving next to the person that's putting their makeup on, eating their McDonald's whatever Egg McMuffin at the
right.
exact same time and texting somebody at the exact same time.
Yeah.
It's like that. The culture is now, how many things can I do at one time? And
Right.
there's no intention behind that at all.
Yeah.
I'm curious, we talk a lot about routines. Like what type of routines, I mean, have you guys implemented either in the morning or in the evening to sort of set your day, on the right path?
Yeah. I love that question. Go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for myself, my routine starts first thing in the morning, getting up and I've got a meditation routine that I do prayer routine that I do, gratitude, writing it down. I journal a lot. And so for me, that's where I'll start my day that way. And then getting into exercise. So like even when we're gone and we're here in Miami, that was the same exact thing that happened today. It doesn't change. I also part of that routine is also making my bed. I'm the checklist person, Brian. That I'm like, I like to see that I've actually accomplished things during the day, and he's definitely not. So
yeah, I'm more charge hell with a water pistol. I don't need a plan, just turn me loose.
Yeah. So I'm a lot more systematic about how it is that I do those things. But even for me, I won't have my first meal typically for myself. And that's the beauty. And we were just talking about this last night. The beauty of metabolic health is there's no one size fits all.
Yeah.
Everybody is different. And that's the beauty behind this. And that's the way we look at people. Whenever we work with people, for example, everything that we do, we customize to the individual that we're working with, because it is not a one size fits all approach to doing things. And so I'll eat typically around 11, 12 o'clock, but I also will keep my feeding window within about 8 hours. And so I want to make sure that I'm eating at least 3 hours before I go to bed, and doing that without any snacking. So that's my routine. And when I look at, like, for example, throughout the week, I'll do a 24-hour fast from Sunday evening to Monday evening. And I do that more for myself to like help reset my body and start the week off that way. So that really is a simplified version of what my routine looks like on a daily basis. I know yours is different.
Yeah, and that's the beauty. You find your groove, you find your routine. I think in more recent years, Brian, I've really gravitated back to just getting back to nature. Really, that's so important. And now we're all inside, we're under artificial light. Everybody's wearing sunglasses, slathering on sunscreen, eating fake processed food, rubber-soled shoes. We're almost disconnected from how we really lived and thrived in years prior. So my routine is I definitely want to get up and I want to get that sunlight into my eyes first thing in the morning. The sun's really been vilified, and there may not be a better mitochondrial support than what we get from the sun with, the photobio, modulation, where you're hitting those mitochondria, which, our eyes have probably most of the mitochondria, the most rich, dense areas are in our eyes. You get that sunlight. It's almost like we're charging our battery pack. 2/3 of our mitochondria's energy requirements come from sunlight. There's a lot of benefits to that. So getting that into your eyes first thing in the morning, getting your feet on the ground. Get barefoot, guys. Quit walking around all day long in rubber-soled shoes. Get those feet dirty. Let your body really connect and get back to nature. This is one of the reasons I love being, at a place like Miami, more so just because I can walk out and get my feet in the sand and get on the beach, get some earthing, get grounded, really give my body a chance to relax. That's when I pray. That's when I'm able to meditate. I have some guided meditation too with like brain tap that I'll do, which I really enjoy. But getting my body up, grounded, sun in my eyes, and then definitely I eat breakfast. I love breakfast. And I was a classic, never eat breakfast, fasting all the time. And for me, I've really done really well. I love eating real food. I love eggs. I love pastured bacon. I love raw cheeses. And I do a lot of juicing. I'm a huge orange juice guy, lots of raw honey. I'm definitely more pro-metabolic in these days where I'm eating way more food and you just can't even gain any weight. But there's been a lot of work that's gone into creating this metabolic level of health, which is one of the reasons we developed a whole metabolism program to help you heal. But once your metabolism is working for you, that morning time, things can get very, very simple. And most of the things that we're talking about are really free. Everybody really can have access to a lot of these things. So that's kind of how my day starts. And, then if I'm hungry again, I'll eat again sometime in the midday. And then, who doesn't love a great steak at dinner, with a side of butter?
Yeah. I mean, I totally agree. I agree with, I try to do grounding. I live in Chicago, so it can be a little challenging, but yeah, traveling, that's probably one of my favorite things when we travel elsewhere, Miami, or I was in Israel, be able to walk the beach there. So yeah, it's amazing how you feel when you could just get out and get some sun and just walk on. It's just it's a simple thing, but you know.
Yeah, and all my HRV scores, tracking with the Whoop, you can see your numbers, your recovery versus your strain, your quality of sleep. It's a real thing. You can see it directly translate. So if anybody tracks their data, has any wearables, those are really cool too, because they'll help you more prioritize some of the things you see working. And even too, like, I don't really fast if my body's not adapting that well because I don't want to create extra stress.
Yeah, good
So,
point.
if you don't feel like your best, probably doing a 24-hour fast isn't the best strategy for you that day. Maybe it's okay not to work out that day. Maybe go for a nice walk, do more simple things, be more intuitive. I think we could all, learn a lot from just listening to our bodies. That goes a long way.
Yeah, no, I agree. You talk about stress, like if you're fasting, plunging, and doing hard workouts, but you have a lot of stress elsewhere, it's probably not a smart idea to compound these things all together. You have to sort of pick and choose the right times to do those things, I feel like.
Yeah, the guy on Instagram who's doing 8 different biohack stacks, who's ripped. Yeah, maybe
Right.
maybe there's some other help involved there. I don't know, but I know this: your body is only able to adapt to so much stress. Hormesis is beautiful, and I love putting myself into a place of stress to adapt. But yeah, too much, obviously, of anything. Stress, it's either you stress or distress. You either adapt to it or you don't. And if you're not adapting, you are metabolically breaking your system down and you're going to feel it. And it doesn't even, and you could even be skinny. It's not even a weight issue. It's more of a metabolic health issue.
And I like to ask this question to guests on the show is like, what's one thing you've changed your mind on in the past, let's just say 15 years?
I love that question.
I think for myself, one of the things, the biggest thing, obviously, because we're talking about this right now, is looking at myself is not being broken. And what I mean by that is, like, I thought that my body was different than other people's bodies when it came to their metabolism. Like I used to look at people and say, oh my gosh, that person's really lucky, or they're really blessed because they have a great metabolism. Meanwhile, I'm over here looking at the bread at dinner and I'm actually gaining weight just by looking at the bread. This person's eating the bread, the pasta, doing all those things. And so I'm going to have to really work really, really hard in order to be able to maintain this healthy weight. So the shift for me was saying, okay, yeah, you don't have a weight problem, you've got a metabolism problem. And once I could be able to then heal the metabolism, then I could be able to enjoy going to dinner, not being freaked out about how many calories that I was eating, but also be just, intentional with how many nutrients I was getting into my body. So that's been a complete shift. And that's taken me out of being that person who always craved sugar, craved sweets, craved bread, craved the chips and all those different things. And so now, with my body being metabolically healthy, I don't have any of those cravings anymore. So if I want one of those things, yeah, I'll eat it. And I'm not stressed about whether or not I'm going to gain weight because of it. So that's been the biggest shift for me in the context of what it is that we're talking about right now.
Yeah, I do love this question because that's been really something that's been really on my heart in more recent years, is really questioning not almost everything that I believe. What is it that I believe and why do I believe it? And when I've really been real and honest with myself, Brian, a lot of the things I believed and even taught and practiced and implemented, I have no idea why I believed it. I guess somebody told it to me. Maybe it was something I learned from my parents. Maybe, something I picked up in a book as a kid. I have no idea. So my superpower has been to unlearn almost everything that I've learned and be willing to now think differently once I get new information. So to answer the question, is I really believe for me, I really don't believe in disease anymore. I think once you believe in a disease, you really become a victim. And here's what I know, being, in this space for almost 25 years, not only just virtually, but clinically working with, hundreds, if not thousands of patients, is victims don't get well. They cannot get well. They can't heal, not emotionally, spiritually, physically. And so when you believe in disease, you really believe that there's no hope, because disease really is incurable. Okay. But dis-ease, where there's interference, is curable, because now that puts you back taking responsibility for your role in your journey and agency in your healing. And so the disease model, really, I believe it's in its terminal phase. If we can continue to educate people and show them that really health and disease, they're really the exact same thing. If you think about it, health and disease are the same thing. It's the body doing the right thing under the circumstances. And I have huge reverence for our innate intelligence and our body's ability to heal symptoms and disease. These are metabolic adaptations. These are therapeutic healing responses. Our body's always working on our behalf. And so the journey really isn't to find another diagnosis or another doctor to treat. It's really, how do I now take full responsibility for my health and try to remove the interference so my body will express health, which it's been doing for a very, very long time. I don't know that all of us need more healing. We probably need less interference and less victim mentality. And so that's been a huge shift for me, and especially more in recent years. There's a lot of things I've had to unbelieve over the last several years. That's probably a whole separate podcast because I've gone down some rabbit holes. But metabolically speaking and health speaking, we'll go with that one.
Yeah, thank you for that. And we talk a lot about metabolism, and I've had a lot of like pro-metabolic guests recently. Anywhere from like Georgie Dinkoff, Jay Feldman, so on and so forth. Kathleen Stewart, just had Kitty Bloomfeld on, if I'm saying that right. And it's interesting because I think, there's this shift you're seeing with even some carnivores, right? They're implementing fruit and honey and realizing that maybe metabolically and even like for thyroid health, like just eating one macronutrient isn't maybe the more optimal option for your long-term health. What are your guys' thoughts around that? I know it's sort of been shifting. I'm seeing that.
I would say, when you look at, speaking of macros, we've got, proteins, we have carbohydrates, we've got water, we've got these different macros that our body has to have in order to be able to sustain life. They're there for a reason. Again, it goes back to going, okay, everybody's body is different. And I agree. When you say, I don't know that eating one macro and doing that for a long period of time is going to be your best strategy to be healthy when it does come to healthy longevity. So I think a lot of it is having an awareness of what's right for your body and really understanding, rather than trying to force your body into a state that it's not supposed to be in on its own. And so I think when you can be able to start learning that, you start understanding and learning what macros work best for you. I think that when you start understanding also the biochemistry of how the body works, like this guy right here is a genius when it comes to understanding the biochemistry of how things work. A lot of times those things go right over my head. I'm just like, all right, just, help me understand what that means. And then I'll put it into terms that people can actually understand. And so once we start understanding that and how it works together, I think that right there creates a lot better foundation for you when it does come to your health. But I don't think, you should be just consuming just one macronutrient for the rest of your life. That to me makes zero sense.
Yeah. And I'm definitely no Georgie Dinkoff. That guy's unbelievable, man.
Oh my
The
God.
way he can regurgitate and pull and call it.
He's like a human encyclopedia. I've had him on a few times.
Unreal. Who is this guy?
And he stopped doing podcasts, I think, recently because it took a lot of his time. But I had him on at least a couple times, and I was always blown away. But anyways, go ahead, Randy.
Well, so we were having this conversation actually last night about what are some of like the top, metabolic or diet approaches over the last, 10 years. And, obviously the keto world really took off. Obviously, we are eliminating carbohydrates, eating high fat. And then, of course, the carnivore has been huge. And by the way, all these diets work, and then sometimes they don't, but they all work. But then, of course, carnivore is not a keto diet because obviously you're eating so much protein, you are making gluconeogenesis, so you're not really running off ketones per se. So you've got those two main areas there. Then you've really got, as we're kind of going into more of this more pro-metabolic space, which is interesting. And so even like a Paul Saladino, kind of his theory of like eating more animal-based fruit, honey, raw milk, obviously not necessarily a full pro-metabolic approach, but definitely more in that direction. And of course, he looks pretty good and seems like he likes it. I'm probably more, I fall into that, where I'm not really worried about macros per se, just really nutrient dense food and eating
Right.
more, easily digestible carbohydrates. And now this, the honey diet's kind of floating around everywhere, right? I think,
Well, Mark Bell is going
okay.
on a high sugar diet. Just that's I don't you know Mark Bell? You familiar with him? Oh, okay.
I don't know him. I've never
Mark
met
Bell
him, but I know who you're
was big
talking
in the
about.
keto space. But anyways, you're right. Yes, honey diet, because ramping up their glucose oxidation and
Yeah,
yeah, he was a keto guy for a long time and lost a bunch of
yeah.
weight that way, but he's sort of just giving, shifting his, so you're seeing sort of this lean towards pro metabolic, which anyways, go ahead. I interrupted you.
No, you're right. No, but it's just kind of funny. So you're seeing that obviously, and I think the Joe Mercolas of the world has really written a book and kind of gone down that road
Yeah,
as
I have
well.
his book.
Um,
Yeah.
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 So there's a lot of brilliant pieces to all of those approaches. I
Mm.
wouldn't necessarily want to follow all of them forever, but there's a lot of beauty to it. One of the approaches that we've messed around with and seen incredible metabolic results is actually where you're actually removing fat, which is pro-metabolic, but we're also removing carbohydrate. So you're taking two macros and removing them. But by doing that, what you can do is you can create an environment where your body can endogenously burn fat for fuel. A lot of people walking around have got 50, 100, 200,000 plus calories of fat just sitting on their body that they can't get access to because they're so metabolically broken and they're in such a low energy state from years of crash dieting and addiction to exercise and God knows what else. So one of the approaches that we use is a fatty acid type depletion and deprivation. One of the reasons we do that is your body will now begin to release stored omega-6, which is very powerful because obviously we know omega-6 stores in our body, I don't know, what do they say, 680-day half-life. So after 680 days, half this stuff is still wreaking havoc and lowering your metabolic rate, almost setting you up for hibernation, torpor, right? Your metabolic rate is lower. So fatty acid deprivations, along with restricting carbohydrates, getting your body burning more fat, it seems when you even use that type of an approach, you can actually get the body to get very efficient at burning fat again. That way you can now help them get metabolically flexible, which isn't just burning fat for fuel, it's also having the ability to burn glucose for fuel. Both of those are important, and you want to have the ability to go back and forth. So we've seen some incredible results with working from that type of a strategy with people. Not only do they lose a ton of weight, but you can get them metabolically flexible in about 4, 5, maybe 6 weeks.
Maybe explain that again. I'm a touch confused by that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's
Yeah.
talk about it.
So
So
so so you were just saying, well, go ahead. Say it one more time.
yeah,
Yeah.
Rob, you may have to be my interpreter because
No,
so
because
the
I guess I was confused. You said you're actually you're lowering carbohydrate and you're lowering fat, right? Is that what you were
yeah,
saying?
no fat, low
Okay.
carbohydrate,
Okay.
moderate protein.
Moderate pro. So a
So
little.
when you
Okay.
Yeah, so you're still, it's moderate to low protein. So you're still kind of limiting some amino acids, some methionine restriction, some isoleucine restriction, which is a little more on the pro-metabolic side. But you're eliminating fat. And the reason we do that and we've played around with that, and there's a lot of studies on this, more in the animal models, but once your body doesn't have fat, at some point your body will make a fatty acid called mead acid. You ever heard of mead acid?
I've heard about it a little bit.
Yeah, it's an endogenous polyunsaturated fatty acid. It's almost like a rescue fatty acid. So what happens as you remove fat, almost like fasting, your body's going to start to release fatty acids into the bloodstream. And that's a signal to the body to help go save those cell membranes or those tissue by making this meat acid. So it's a hormetic response, it's a stress response, and you wouldn't want to stay in it forever. Just like most diets, you don't want to go so extreme forever. But by doing that, the body can get really good at now learning how to go grab its own fat for energy, deplete the body of omega-6, and help stabilize those cell membranes. So by going no
Okay.
fat, lower carbohydrate, moderate protein, we've been able to develop a system with how we can help people go through this guided, supported and get incredible results. Well, we're seeing people, even lose like 22, 28, up to 35 pounds in about a 5-week period, where you're actually reversing visceral fat, actually healing and restoring gut integrity, and upregulating your metabolic profile. Because once you now bring carbohydrates back into their system and you can still keep fat low, you can almost put them into a pro-metabolic state easier and get an incredible result, where now maybe they could only burn 1,200 calories before. Now they're able to burn 2,000, 3,000. I mean, most people, if they go over 1,200 calories, Brian, they gain weight, which is so metabolically crippled. So I just brought that up to even pose another suggestion or another strategy. All these diets you're either doing high fat, you're doing low protein, you're doing low carb, but going low fat or no fat and manipulating some of those other strategies there, you can actually get a pretty incredible result. Does that help at all? Or did I even make it more confusing?
No, I got it. So it's almost just like a stepping stone to going almost like into the pro metabolic space, but you're just taking that extra step, which could be just like 3 or 4 weeks of.
Yeah, because a lot of the people doing that pro metabolic stuff, they're already metabolically healthy. Almost nobody who's metabolically unhealthy and overweight is going to go do the honey diet if they're being honest with themselves. It's just, and it's probably maybe not going to work great for them. I don't know. But yeah, most people that's a huge jump for them. Although there's a lot of data to support going pro metabolic, there's no question.
Well, and also, but you're seeing that as well, like bringing the fat down.
Yeah,
is sort of like, I know that's a stepping stone for you guys, but like that, obviously you want to have some fat, just for like.
Yeah, for sure.
But like, especially like Mark Bell talks a little bit about how he's upped his glucose oxidation, but he's also brought down his fat. Like,
yeah,
combining the two is where you could get into a lot of trouble.
Yeah, the Randle effect, right? The Randle
Yeah.
phenomenon. Yeah, you don't want to get into that glycation problem where you're going high fat, high carb. I think we would all agree, don't want to do that one, especially
Right.
eating the wrong fats and processed sugar, seed oil and high fructose corn syrup. That is a metabolic devastating bomb.
Right.
You don't get away with that one.
It's like the perfect picture would be like a donut, right? It's got everything, right?
That or French fries, right? The donut or the French fries. Yeah.
Right. I mean, because people are like, they demonize sugar, but really, you're seeing this sugar on its own is actually okay. It's the things around it that can cause the metabolic dysfunction, right?
Yeah, 100.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. No, yeah, there's nothing. I mean, your body, listen, if you don't eat it, it's going to make it.
Right.
You need it. And so, yeah, sugar's been vilified, but, processed sugar should be vilified. But I don't know that really eating natural sugars is really the problem we have, where you've got almost 94% of America metabolically unhealthy. I don't think they're eating too much fresh fruit. I don't think that's the problem.
Yeah. No, totally agree. Yeah. And fruit was demonized. Fructose was demonized for a long time.
It's still demonized in a lot of circles. You still hear it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love fruit, man.
Yeah.
If you don't believe in God, just know that he gave us fruit. That ought to make you believe in God right there. Honey and fruit. He definitely loves us.
Yeah. No, I've been implementing more of that. And that's a good way to, easily digestible. Most fruits are. I think, apples could be a little bit tougher, but for the most part, that's what a lot of the carbohydrates are coming from fruit. Even white rice is a easily digestible carbohydrate you can implement. Yeah.
The first time I even heard of using that was over in Spain. Dr. Healy was talking about how, you'd cook the rice, then you'd obviously put it in the refrigerator, then reheat it to kind of break down a lot of the resistant starch and make it more simple to digest. And so, yeah, you just don't want to get a bunch of undigested food into your colon. Clearly, that's probably not a good strategy. So for a lot of people, we've been able to even work with them on getting them, simple sugars and getting most of the food digested into the gut, into the small intestine, way before it gets to the colon. Heck, you'll even see, like, you hear stories of people who've had colostomy bags had their colon removed. And at the stoma, which goes into the bag, if they're eating a bunch of plants or a lot of like vegetables,
roughage,
it doesn't even break down, yet the meat's all liquid and the fruit is all breaking down in liquid, especially if you're juicing. So a lot of those hard to break down soluble fibers can be a problem for a lot of people. That's why, ripe fruit, that's kind of like the plant wants you to eat it, right?
Right.
That's why it looks like it does and it tastes so good versus eating something that probably doesn't taste good. The plant's probably saying, yeah, I don't want you to ever eat me again. So ripe fruit, I think, is probably a good strategy for a lot of people. And if you have any gastrointestinal issues, juicing can be your friend, and it's very easy to break down, get rid of the fiber. I think fiber's probably been overrated. Back in the 90s, they cut our fat and told us to eat more whole grains, and everybody got constipated. I don't think it was a lack of fiber. I think it was a lack of good fats and improper hydration. But yeah, I don't know that focusing on eating 50 grams of fiber a day is the best strategy either. I don't eat a lot of fiber, and seems to be pretty solid.
Yeah. Do you juice a lot? Is that something you've been?
I do. Just gotta know I like how I feel. That's a good test too for a lot of people.
Yeah.
When you eat, what happens? Do you feel bloated? Do you feel lethargic? Do you feel sluggish? Like, I can eat a lot of food and a lot of like natural sugars from juicing and honey, and you wouldn't know. You'd look at my stomach before I ate, and then right after I ate, it looks exactly the same, and I don't feel tired. A lot of people are eating, they're getting sluggish, lethargic, they're bloated, because that tells you right there your body's not doing good and you're not breaking down that food. I used to be so gassy back in the day when you're eating all the processed protein powders and eating all day long. Now you're like 90% less gassy, which is a good sign of healthy, absorption of the foods that you are eating.
Yeah, no, that is, yeah. I mean, obviously seeing how you feel. And I think if you are implementing some of these, maybe start slower and just work your way up. What's one tip you'd give someone? This is sort of, well, getting towards the end, but what's one tip would you give someone, if they were looking to get their bodies back to what it once was, maybe 10, 15 years ago? What first step would you tell them to take?
For us, we make it really simple. Our moniker is always like, assess, don't guess. Find out why your body isn't functioning the way it's supposed to, rather than just jumping onto Google and Googling all of the latest fad diets and or things that are out there. Because even like Randy was saying, is when we take a look at how the body works and everything is created differently, I think what happens with people is they get stuck into the whole calories in, calories out thing. No matter what it is that they see that's out there, they start reducing their calories. And now you have that person that has a poor metabolic foundation. If they have a poor metabolic foundation, as soon as they stop doing whatever it is that they found through Google, they're going to gain all the way back and more. So even like you were saying, is for us, when we're easing people into working with us and setting that metabolic foundation, now after they have that good metabolic foundation, they can start playing around with some other things. The problem is that when they have a poor metabolic foundation, nothing works for them, whether it's keto, paleo, Mediterranean diet, South Beach diet, where we're at. It doesn't really matter if you're doing that on a poor metabolic foundation. It's kind of like if you tried to build a house on sand, what's going to happen, right? You have a poor foundation, the house is going to collapse on itself, versus having a firm foundation. Once you have that metabolic foundation, it makes life way more fun, and you can play around with those things that we're talking about as far as being in that pro-metabolic space.
Yeah. And I think people just keep making the same mistake because it's just been baked into us. It's the eat less, move more. So I would say if you're using food or diet and exercise to lose weight, you're just using it inappropriately. Food isn't for weight loss. It's for nourishing your body with nutrients and vitamins and minerals and giving your body the fuel that it needs. And exercise isn't for weight loss. It's for your health. I mean, how many benefits do you get from moving your body? So eating real food, nutrition, and moving your body should be a part of a healthy lifestyle. Maybe the two most cornerstone pieces that nobody could argue. But I think a lot of people, Brian, they're using diet and exercise to try to lose weight, which usually means you're going to be starving yourself, cutting out key things that you need, and trying to somehow exercise yourself into health. And I think they played that out on national TV with the Biggest Loser competition.
Sure.
Everybody went from being overweight to miserable and losing weight to now bigger than they were before with lower basal metabolic rates, because you just can't starve your way into health. And if you try to lose weight with most of these approaches, you actually have to become more unhealthy to do it, which is why you gain it back. So stop asking, how do I lose weight? Start focusing on, how do I heal my metabolism? That's a much better question which will get you to a much better result and point you in the right direction.
Love that. That's a good place to finish up. Where's the best place to find you guys?
I see it. And like we were saying, as far as even on assessing, just to start off, if you go to metabolismscore.com, we've got a quiz there. And in that quiz, people can find out how their metabolism is doing, what the function of that is. And then we guide them through some steps that they can be able to use in order to be able to help them with healing their metabolism. So that'd be the first place to go to be able to find us is metabolismscore.com, or you can find us on Instagram, which is at the number 2 life on Instagram. And we've got all kinds of tips, tricks, strategies, content information that's there for, everything from metabolic health to eliminating seed oils, detoxing your body. It's all there on that Instagram site.
Excellent. Yeah, I'll put a link in the show notes. I know you guys have a few products that you have on your website as well.
SCT oil. That was our very first product we made. In fact, really quickly, that was born out of our time in Spain, Brian. So one of the things that Dr. Helu had found is my body, I was eaten up with heavy metals. So there were parasites everywhere in my body. And I was very deficient in short chain fatty acids like butyrate and other like short chain fats, which clearly feed the colonocytes in our colon, can drive strong metabolic and mitochondrial function. And so he had me eating like raw aged cheeses while I was over there to directly source my body with these key fats. Well, when we came back over into America, we're like, man, we need to help create a product or some awareness around this issue because it can't just be me. And so we basically launched and started and built a product out called SCT oil. It's a short chain triglyceride. So you're getting that butyrate, that acetate, that propionate, those fats that help work with leptin signaling and hormone signaling in the gut and burning visceral fat. So we actually launched our product in 2017, I think?
2017.
And it's still our number 1 best-selling product today. Doctors use it, customers love it. And we made it for ourselves. We love it. And just so happen other people happen to love it too. And so people still want us to make it and buy it. We're going to keep making it. And the public has spoken. SCT oil, man. It is such an incredible oil.
That's what we use it to actually put it in our coffee. That loud noise that you heard was my coffee. And I've got that the SCT.
Oh, I didn't. We didn't hear anything.
Right in there.
Dude, we got to send you some, man. You got to hit us up with an address. We'll hook you up.
I appreciate it. And this is a little bit different than MCTs because I'm sure that's what you normally hear.
Yeah, huge difference. MCT it's a fractionated oil. So you're breaking apart those carbon bonds. So, a lot of people, what do they call it? Disaster pants, I believe is the condition that some people experience when you choke down MCT oil. Yeah, you can't really cook with it. It's not only something you'd find in nature. Obviously, you can get medium chains in like coconut oil or other fats. But yeah, this is a real food product. It's very labor intensive. We created a whole new standard, and it's going to be rich in some medium chain, some long chain fats, but really rich in the shorter chain fats, even some odd chain fatty acids. C15 is kind of a big hot topic right now. And, with the way our cattle are fed, the cows are fed, they're eating more taller grasses like fescue, which will now make more of those odd chain fatty acids, which have massive metabolic benefits. So SCT oil is probably still our favorite and best-selling product, and people love it, and we love it too. So we'll have to hook you up, buddy.
Oh, I'd love that. Yeah, and you cook in these as well, because
yeah, you don't want to cook in MCT oil. House will smell like what?
It smells like metal.
Really?
Yeah.
I've tried coconut oil. It's fine. Coconut
oil is fine, but if you try to use that.
No, yeah. And tallow I'll use from time to time. Tallow's nice.
Yeah, tallow's nice. I think tallow is in this, animal-based nutrition. Coconut oil is great. SCT oil, grass-fed butter. My mom grew up, my great-grandmother lived to be 100. I love hearing from people in the longevity space who are in their 40s and 50s. It's like, well, let's hear it when you're 120. But my great-grandmother was a longevity expert before biohacking was cool, and she never spoke on a stage. But she lived to be 100 years old on no medication, at her ideal weight, had a 4-acre garden, had hogs, had chickens, had milking cows. So my mom said they grew up eating and cooking everything in pig lard. And, nobody had heart disease and nobody had chronic disease. So, there's
Right.
probably a lot to ancestral animal-based eating and cooking. More raw milk and pastured eggs and animal fats is probably a good implementation we could all benefit from.
Yeah, no doubt about that. And you're seeing, well, some of the fast food chains are implementing that a little bit. I think you're seeing that. They've gone
What
to
do they say they are? I don't know.
Yeah,
You
I
can
know.
trust these guys if you're putting anti-foaming agent into
Yeah,
your
I heard that. Yeah, yeah, they're
I don't
using
know,
tallow, but
but,
they're still using these agents, and so you're better off not going there. So
probably not. I mean, if you're going to go, just be honest with yourself and say you want a burger and fries, and don't try
Right.
to justify it. Just say, hey, I'm making a conscious decision, and I'll do
Right.
better tomorrow.
Right. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Well, this was great, guys. Happy, healthy guys. Happy, healthy life. And metabolismscore.com. I'll put links in the show notes so you can find Rob and Randy and everything they're doing. So thanks so much again for coming on, guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having us, Brian.
Appreciate you, Brian.
Enjoy Miami.
Oh, yeah.
Thanks for listening to the Get Lean, Eat Clean podcast. I understand there are millions of other podcasts out there, and you've chosen to listen to mine, and I appreciate that. Check out the show notes at briangryn.com for everything that was mentioned in this episode. Feel free to subscribe to the podcast and share it with a friend or family member that's looking to get their body back to what it once was. Thanks again, and have a great day.